A lot of people today feel lost, and this is not because they're not doing anything with their lives, but it's because they did exactly what they were told to do. They chose something they like, or they chose money or status as their main objective. They try to build their life around personal fulfillment, but still at the end, they don't feel happy. And it's not full-blown depression, it's just a quiet background feeling like, is this really it? So, do what you like sounds like really good advice. It sounds nice, it sounds catchy, but it doesn't really tell you, how to choose a direction in life, because it needs to hold up over time. And what if something you like is not good enough and it's not giving you fulfillment in the long term? And what if doing something you like is bad for you or for the people around you, for the world? In this video, we are going to look at meaning in a different way. We're going to look at it as something that your brain and body constantly evaluate. And specifically based on your direction, your fit in the social environment, and your contribution to a social system. This is part 2 of a 4-part series about meaning and finding meaning in life. And if you haven't watched the first part yet, please watch this one first. It's about making progress and the dopamine systems, and I'll put the link of the video on the screen right now. In the previous video, we discussed that you don't just want motivation in general, but you want meaningful motivation. Because your dopamine system happily lets you spend all of your time and energy in leveling up a fictional character, even though your real life character still stays level 1. And in that video, we also defined meaning as making progress in a direction that matters with people who matter. Because you don't exist as a standalone individual in the world. You exist inside systems, inside social structures. And these systems also exist inside bigger systems. You can see on the screen right now what I mean with this. Meaning depends on coherence across these social nested layers. At every layer, your life has to make sense and fit together within your social structures. At the smallest layer, there's you as an individual. You in your life have a direction, you need an aim, you need a way to go. Also in life, you need to make progress, you need to make steps, you need to do things. And finally, you also need to feel connected socially to other people around you. The second layer, where you exist in as an individual, is your small group, your social group. Think about your family, your close friends, or the team you are nested in school or at work. And this layer also fits inside a bigger system. And this group exists inside a larger nested structure. Think about your class in school or your school itself. You can think about the company or the team you are a part of with your close friends. Or a small community or group in your neighborhood, whatever. And this system is again also nested inside a bigger system, inside a larger system. Think about your neighborhood, your city, or a region, or your company can be a part of a franchise. And these layers also exist inside bigger structures. Think of a country, a culture, or humanity as a whole, or the faith you are a part of. All systems are nested inside bigger social systems. And at every layer of this pyramid, your life needs to make sense. As an individual, your close relationships, the people around you, in the group or the team you belong to, and also within the larger systems these systems function in. Each layer has its own goals, its own direction, and its own aims. Whether your life feels coherent across these layers, these nested layers, is not just a philosophical question, but it's a biological one. The system that continuously evaluates whether your direction still fits within these layers is largely modulated by serotonin. And a lot of people think serotonin is about being happy right now, but that's not true. Serotonin asks things like, is this direction safe enough to continue? Can I persist in this direction over time? But also, does my role still make sense in my social environment? And does my life form a coherent story? Serotonin is deeply involved in direction, fit, and long-term coherence within the nested social systems that you live in. So, in the last video we talked about dopamine, and this helps you move forward. And serotonin helps determine whether the direction works for you, specifically for your body, for your close relationships, and for the social systems you are a part of. So, what is serotonin? Well, serotonin is a neurotransmitter, and this is a chemical that your brain uses to communicate. Your single brain cells use this to send messages to each other. And where does it come from? Well, most of the brain's serotonin is produced in the raphe nuclei. And this is a small cluster in the brainstem, as you can see in the image here. And from there, the serotonergic neurons project diffusely to almost the entire brain. Okay, I can already see the question balloon pop up. What does diffusely mean? Well, it means that the serotonin doesn't have any specific spots or specific messages where it works on, but it has a broad influence on the broadcast of other signals. You can think about setting the mode for the entire brain, not single commands, but like mode settings. Like you can think of it like a dimmer switch that affects multiple lights in a room or multiple lights in different rooms. So, as I said earlier, a lot of people think serotonin equals happiness, but this is not true. Serotonin does not primarily trigger actions, it doesn't create sharp emotion, and it doesn't encode precise rewards like dopamine, for example. Instead, it modulates other systems. It adjusts thresholds, adjusts the gain or the persistence of certain signals, and it stabilizes patterns over time. So, my bad mind, my biased mind, I think, immediately goes to the rave parties I've been to and thinks about MDMA, for example. So how does that work? Well, MDMA releases massive amounts of serotonin, but in a non-psychological way. So this overload, this flood, overwhelms the regulation you have normally, and it produces really intense emotions. And the key thing here is that these emotions are a side effect of the destabilization that the effect is of this enormous flood. And this is not the normal mode of working for serotonin. Serotonin is not a do X now system, but it's a global regulatory signal. So, what does that actually mean? Well, instead of telling the brain what to do, serotonin influences how easily things happen, how intensely they happen, and how long they last. For example, how easy fear turns on or how easy fear starts, how strongly your anger escalates, how long a certain mood or a certain thought loop persists, and how quickly these systems turn to the baseline again. So this is also why neuroscientists often describe serotonin as regulating cognitive stability versus flexibility, your emotional reactivity, and long-term behavioral persistence. Serotonin works on 4 core systems inside of the brain. The first one is the threat and effective reactivity system. And threat sounds pretty easy, but effective reactivity system is the system that is about the mood reaction you have to daily activities or to daily things that happen. And this mainly centered on the amygdala circuits, and these are circuits that are used for instinctual behavior, and it's about the emotional part of the brain. So, what does serotonin modulate here? Well, serotonin modulates how easily threat circuits activate, how long fear or anxiety responses of the brain last, and whether ambiguous stimuli are interpreted as being dangerous. So, when you have a well-regulated serotonin system, the threat response you have to things is proportional to the threat. Your emotions will rise when it's needed, so anger, happiness, etc. When it's needed, when it's necessary, when it's useful, and they will settle when they are no longer useful. So when something scary happens, you get scared, because that has a very good use. And when the threat dissipates, when it disappears, then you will become relaxed again after a short time. So why is it so necessary that your emotions settle again? Well, the activation of the emotion is not really the problem, but it's a problem when it fails to get down to the normal levels again. If your emotions do not settle, if they stay high, if you keep in this mode, the body will keep acting as if the threat is still present long after it's gone. And of course, this is a very stressful mode for being, and As we all know, stress is really, really bad for the body and for the brain. So I have a quick example. Imagine you receive some feedback at work from your boss. A healthy response would be that you have, brief stress, short amount of stress, that your attention increases because it's important to pay attention right now, that you do an adjustment in your behavior based on the feedback, and afterwards that you recover and that you go back to your baseline. When your serotonin control is low, or when the system is dysregulated, the threat response will not shut off after the threat is gone. And this can lead to hypervigilance, which is the constant scanning for danger, even in safe situations. It can lead to chronic anxiety, which is not nice, as you might know, and to emotional looping, which is the replaying of conversations, having these negative thought loops without any solution or resolution to them. So why does it matter for direction? Well, long-term paths require that you can tolerate uncertainty. If threat systems stay too loud for too long of a time, the path you take, your direction, will feel unsafe. Even when it's not, when it's completely safe and you should go there. And when the system is misaligned, when you are misaligned, it will, most of the time, it will first show up as persistent threat or persistent feeling of threat without any clear danger. The second system in the brain is the behavioral inhibition and patience system. And this system is about the inhibition of behavior and about keeping patience, and mainly involves the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia. What does serotonin modulate here? Well, in this system, serotonin is involved in impulse suppression, so suppressing not acting on the first urge or first impulse you have. It's involved in waiting behavior, and also to resistance to short-term temptation, which is very important. If you think about it, it's the capacity to pause before you act, to delay gratification, and to choose a future-oriented action over an immediately rewarding one. So, how do we know this? Well, strong scientific evidence shows that certain serotonin neurons fire more during waiting for delayed rewards. And also when they artificially stimulated mice with serotonin, so they raised their serotonin levels, the animals would wait longer even without having any immediate reward or any immediate payoff. And the third one is that when subjects had reduced serotonin, they had more impulsivity quitting and more I want it now behavior. So why does this matter for direction? Well, direction is commitment to a future that does not always pay off immediately. And the key distinction here is that dopamine gets you started, but that serotonin keeps you from abandoning the path halfway if there's no immediately rewarding thing on the route. It's literally a stay on this course system. The third brain system is the social evaluation and norm sensitivity system. And as the name might suggest, it's involved in social evaluation and norm sensitivity. And it mainly involves the medial prefrontal cortex, as you can see here on the image, the anterior cingulate, and the networks that are used for social decisions. So in this system, serotonin modulates your sensitivity to fairness, it regulates your aggression, it also regulates your responses to violations of social norms, and also the guilt and shame intensity, and also the duration of guilt and shame. So key findings here is that in people with lower serotonin, they have a stronger reaction to perceived unfairness in the social system or in a group. And they have more punitive, impulsive, and retaliatory behavior to perceived unfairness. So what does this look like in real life? Well, it looks like people overreacting to small insults, to escalating social conflicts very quickly, or that people act in ways that damage their long-term relationships, and that it feels harder to regulate social emotions. So why does this system matter for your direction? Well, obviously direction is not something purely individual. It must align with the roles you play inside your social group, it must align with the norms that are in the social groups you inhabit, and it also must align with the shared values we have with the social groups you inhabit. Serotonin helps stabilize your social coherent behavior over a long period of time. And this is also where serotonin bridges direction and connectedness, which is the subject of the next video. The fourth and final system is the system of cognitive stability and narrative coherence. This involves the default mode network, which is a network of interconnected regions active during internal thought, or when you daydream, when you're doing some self-reflection, and when you recall memories. And it's mainly involved in the prefrontal areas of the brain. So, what does serotonin influence here? Serotonin influences your rumination and your flexibility, and this is getting stuck on thoughts or things or moving on very quickly. It's involved in the persistence of certain self models, and with this I mean how stable the feeling of this is who I am is. And it's also involved in the coherence of your identity over time. A well-regulated serotonin system supports reflective thought. It allows for meaning making, conscious meaning making, and it stabilizes the concept that you have of yourself. But when your system is disrupted, it can lead to very rigid and negative narratives about yourself. It can lead to very looping thoughts, very negative looping thoughts, and it can lead to identity fragmentation. And identity fragmentation feels like, I don't know who I am anymore, or when your values, the things you find important, change every week, or when you set a goal and it loses its meaning very fast, or as soon as you set it. So why does this matter for direction? Well, your direction in life requires a stable sense of this is who I am becoming, a stable narrative about yourself. And if your identity is very unstable, your direction will collapse. So now that we've discussed the 4 brain systems where serotonin has a lot of influence, and now that we've discussed the influence of serotonin on these systems, let's try to put it all together. Serotonin modulates systems that answer, is this safe enough to continue? Which is about threat modulation. It answers, can I stay on this path without breaking? Which is about patience and inhibition. It answers, does my behavior still fit my group and the values of the group and me? This is about social regulation. And the final one is, does my life still make sense as a story to myself and to others? And this is about the narrative coherence, which is very important. If the answers to these questions are yes, then you have alignment with direction across the nested social layers, the nested social structures you were part of. So you're aligned within the social system, within your social environment. Your job fits you, the team fits you, the company fits the country, the team fits the company it's in, and also the other way around. So your team fits you, your values align with the team's values, etc. So serotonin doesn't choose the direction you take, but it keeps you psychologically intact while you're moving in this direction. Or it can stabilize you when your direction is unsustainable in the long term. Serotonin modulates threat sensitivity, patience, social self-regulation, and your identity stability, which are the exact systems that a human needs to stay on a long-term direction that fits the need of their body, the needs of their future self, and the needs of their social environment. So, now that we understand what serotonin does and which systems it stabilizes, we can finally talk about how to use this knowledge to become who we could be by applying psychology. Ideals don't work without conditions because serotonin doesn't care about abstract ideas. It stabilizes very specific conditions, and if these conditions are missing, no amount of motivation or insight will fix it. So, before we talk about direction, we need to talk about the baseline conditions which are needed for serotonin to function normally. Serotonin cannot stabilize anything if the body itself is under constant stress all the time. If we look at it from an evolutionary perspective, the body always came first. For most of our history, human history, survival really depended on having sufficient food, having clean water, moving regularly, having good daylight exposure, sleeping well, and having physical safety. And these things are not lifestyle choices, but they are survival parameters. Even though modern society sometimes makes them feel optional, the brain still treats their absence as being a threat. The serotonin synthesis and the regulation of it really depend on having adequate nutrition, including enough tryptophan, because this is used as the fuel for your cells, having a good circadian rhythm, good sleep quality, physical activity, and that you're not inflamed on the whole of your body. When these inputs are disrupted, your baseline serotonin will drop, your threat sensitivity will increase, the emotional recovery, as we talked about, will slow down, and being patient will become very difficult. This is why chronic sleep deprivation, poor diet, lack of daylight often produce anxiety or a low mood without any psychological cause. The systems are already unstable before you even have time to think a negative thought. So if you ask yourself, why does everything feel hard lately? The first questions are not philosophical, but they are biological. Are you sleeping at roughly consistent times? Are you exposed to daylight daily? Are you moving your body regularly? And are you chronically stressed or inflamed? And if this is the case, why? And working on these things is not optimizing yet, but it's just the basic maintenance you should do. No long-term direction can be sustained on a failing system, a failing body. But once the body is stable, then we can talk about direction. And there, serotonin points us somewhere very specific. Humans did not survive as isolated individuals. Our survival depended on the group. It depended to being useful and a useful part of the group, and thus contributing, because there was mutual dependence. Being useful was not a moral idea, which is just the freedom of modern life, but it was a biological necessity for survival. And because of that, the brain evolved systems that ask, do I belong to a group? And I contributing to the group? Because, you want the group to survive. You need the group to survive. And you need the group to want you for their survival too. Modern culture often promotes direction based on personal pleasure, individual success, and status or self-expression. But real direction, centered only on the self, will create a problem, because it lacks external stabilizers. From the perspective of serotonin, social feedback becomes inconsistent, norms lose relevance, and your long-term coherence will weaken. And this will often lead to the feeling of emptiness after you achieve something, general restlessness, loss of meaning, and just chronic dissatisfaction in life. And this is not because pleasure is bad, but it's because pleasure is biologically meaningless for survival. So, what is serotonin optimized for? Well, serotonin stabilizes patience, persistence, emotional regulation, and social coherence. And these make sense only when your actions are embedded into a group, meaningful beyond your personal self, and when they're oriented towards long-term value. Serotonin is tuned for contribution, not for consumption. So, how can we define direction properly? Well, a biological sustainable direction has three properties. The first one is that it matters to other people. Second one is that it solves real problems. And the third one is that it remains valuable over time. And examples of what this can look like is teaching, building, maintaining systems that are critical for society, caring for people, and this can be any people, but also elders, handicapped, younger people, etc. And also creating structures that others rely on. It doesn't really matter what you do, but it matters that others are better off because of your existence. So, how can you choose a direction? Well, instead of asking yourself, what do I enjoy most? Ask questions that point to problems in the social world. And this can be questions like, what things around me clearly don't work as well as they should? What keeps bothering me because it feels unnecessary, inefficient, or harmful? Or what problems do I hear other people complain about again and again? The answers you get from these questions are not random, but they are signals that something in the system needs attention. And after you've done this, you can narrow it down. Um, which problems affect groups and not just individuals, so you can make more impact. Which problems make life harder for many people over time, and which problems persist because no one takes responsibility for fixing them. So, what makes a problem worth orienting your life around? Well, problems worth orienting your life around usually have three features. They are real and reoccurring, they affect others besides you, and they would clearly improve things if they were fixed. And now bring it back to yourself. Ask yourself, do I understand this problem well enough to help me improve it? Do I have, or could I develop the skills that are needed to work on this? And could I imagine myself spending years making this thing better? And in practice, this often looks like maintaining systems others rely on, improving inefficient processes, reducing unnecessary suffering or waste in the world or in your social environment, and building structures that make things work better in general. And this can happen in healthcare, in education, in technology, infrastructure, in communities, in institutions. So, yeah, you're not really bounded by anything. You can do anything you want as long as it adds something to the world, as it adds value to the greater good. Meaningful direction is often less about self expression and more about taking responsibility for something that matters to others. Because across many studies, contribution to others consistently ranks among the strongest predictors of life satisfaction. When your direction is oriented towards real problems in your social environment, your actions have clear feedback, your contributions are visible, your role becomes socially anchored, and this stabilizes motivation and your persistence. And this is not because it feels good every day, but because it makes sense. And feeling useful and responsible predicts life satisfaction more strongly than income, comfort, and also momentary happiness. So, when your direction is physically sustainable, socially embedded, and meaningful beyond your personal pleasure, your biological systems will quiet down, your threat systems will quiet down, your patience will increase, your identity will stabilize, and the effort you do feels justified, feels meaningful. So, the two practical takeaways here are that at first you need to build a bodily foundation that allows serotonin systems to function at all, so the basics. And at second, you have to orient your life towards contribution to the greater good and not just your personal pleasure. A direction works long term when your body can sustain it and when it matters to something larger than yourself. So, serotonin helps you stay on a direction over time and it stabilizes threat, patience, and your identity. So you don't fall apart while you're moving forward. But evolution added another requirement, one serotonin alone cannot solve. For almost all of human history, being alone was really dangerous. It was not just emotionally dangerous, but it was biologically dangerous. It was necessary for survival. If you were excluded from a group or not part of a group, you lost your protection, you lost access to food and to other resources, you lost access to information about threats and survival in general, and your survival chances dropped radically. Because of this, the nervous system has evolved to treat connection as a survival signal, as a survival necessity. Societies in general, but especially Western societies, are getting more and more individualistic. And that biology didn't disappear because the societies changed. Our brains still ask, am I embedded in a group? Do I matter to others? And is it safe to invest effort here in this social environment? So, when the answer is unclear, the system goes into panic mode, into stress mode. And that's because there is a dedicated biological system for bonding, trust, and cooperation. And that system is driven by oxytocin. And oxytocin doesn't just make you feel connected, but it tells your nervous system that you are not alone, that the effort here is shared, that you can share your effort here, and that this direction is safe to commit to. If you understand this system, you can build connections that actually reduce your stress. You can choose environments that support your long term effort, and you can stop trying to sustain meaning in ways that we were never designed for. In the next video, we'll break down how the oxytocin system actually works, why some forms of social being being social don't help at all, and how to use connection as it was biologically intended to support direction, persistence, and to find meaning.